Welcome to my presentation on diffusion, active transport, and osmosis. There are two types of diffusion: facilitated diffusion and simple diffusion. Diffusion can be defined as the net movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, and therefore along a concentration gradient. Simple diffusion will often help with the transportation of small soluble and non-polar molecules across a cell membrane. On the other hand, facilitated diffusion tends to use carrier proteins and channel proteins to help with the transportation of large lipid-insoluble and polar molecules. Polar molecules essentially refers to charged molecules, for example, sodium ions or potassium ions. Diffusion as a process is highly passive, meaning no energy is required, and it literally relies on the random movement of particles. It's important to remember that all particles have kinetic energy, at least some form of kinetic energy. So this is what essentially drives the process, the random movement of particles. How do protein channels and carrier proteins work then? So protein channels are often filled with water to allow for the transportation of water-soluble molecules across the membrane. The protein channels will only open and close in the presence of a specific ion that it transports. Carrier proteins, on the other hand, are studded within the cell surface membrane. When the molecule binds to the carrier protein, it will change shape, thus allowing the molecule to enter the inside of the membrane, and it will move across the membrane according to the concentration gradient. So what is osmosis? Osmosis is the net movement of water molecules from an area of high water potential to an area of low water potential across and along the water potential gradient. The process is again passive and doesn't require any ATP. The whole process tends to work again on the basis that water molecules have some sort of kinetic energy and that particles tend to have random movement. It's important to remember that a solution that has a high water potential will be less negative, and that the lower the water potential, the more negative. A concentrated solution is likely to have a very negative water potential, whereas a less concentrated solution will have a less negative water potential. So what is active transport? Active transport is the movement of molecules from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration, therefore against the concentration gradient. The process therefore requires energy in the form of ATP to drive the process. It will also need carrier proteins to transport the molecules across the plasma membrane. The diagram clearly transports how active transport will work and how molecules are being transported from an area of low concentration to an area of higher concentration. It's important to understand intricate details of how carrier proteins actually work and how ATP is involved in the process. So first, the molecule needed to be moved across the membrane will bind to the receptors on the channel protein, as we said earlier. But on the inside of the cell membrane, an ATP molecule will bind to the protein, causing it to split into ADP and pi inorganic. This, as a result, will change the shape of the protein, resulting in the molecule to cross the membrane. When ADP combines with the inorganic phosphate or pi inorganic to reform ATP, the carrier protein will then revert back to its original shape, therefore closing the gap within the membrane. This is essentially how carrier proteins will work and help during active transport. Thank you for watching my video. If you found it useful, please remember to subscribe to my channel. Thank you.